Good morning and welcome to Center for American Progress. My name is Tom Perriello. I am president of Center for American Progress Action and counselor for policy at the think tank, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this event and our important report, Race to the Top, What Have We Learned from the States So Far? On February 17th, 2009, President Obama signed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, an act I was proud to vote for, and it had a few different missions, most notably was to prevent a depression at a time where the country was on the brink of absolute economic collapse. But there was also a deeper and longer-term vision, which was to try to imagine rebuilding America's competitive advantage and rebuilding the American dream. And there was an understanding within that we had not yet lived up to the promise that every child should have a chance to reach their full potential here in the United States, regardless of their zip code. And that in the global economy we face today, that's going to require a level of creativity and innovation within our education system, one that we believe that our principals, our teachers, and our parents are up to if we create the incentives and the opportunities for that kind of innovation to take place. The president said it's time to stop just talking about education reform and start actually doing it. It's time to make education America's national mission. And with more than $4.35 billion to back that up, the program got off to a start called Race to the Top. It was part of a bigger effort to invest in critical sectors while supporting innovation and an understanding that too many of our students were leaving high school either ill-prepared for college or the modern workforce. Race to the Top aimed to change that by sparking reform and creating the conditions for greater innovation. The program was competitive, which means that all states would need to submit an application in order to receive the funds, and this in and of itself encouraged innovation and ideas. At the same time, Race to the Top aimed to continue and reform momentum that had already taken hold within the states and defined four key priority areas: adopting more rigorous standards in assessment, recruiting, evaluating, and retaining highly effective teachers and principals, turning around low-performing schools, and building data systems that measure student success. 40 states in the District of Columbia eventually applied for funding, and the U.S. Department of Education announced the winners of Phase 1, Delaware and Tennessee. We'll be hearing a lot about Delaware today, in March of 2010, and the Department of Education released the names of the Phase 2 winners in August of 2010, including 9 states and the District of Columbia. Phase 1 and Phase 2 winners quickly began moving ahead on implementation, and many used the dollars to fund major projects. Maryland, under Governor O'Malley, for instance, trained a team of teachers and a principal from every school on the Common Core, a set of new and more rigorous academic standards that are internationally benchmarked. If one wants to measure Race to the Top against a standard of perfection or having everything figured out from the start, there have certainly been setbacks, there have been failures. But if part of the goal of Race to the Top was to believe that we need innovation, we need to be willing to risk trying things that might not work in order to figure out things that could work better, Race to the Top has already been a tremendous success, and an understanding that we need to be willing to try some of these programs. We have seen the request from the President to continue this program, and the leadership of Secretary Arne Duncan has certainly been something that has raised attention around the country and something that's helped to inspire educators from the local, the state, and the national level to think big and to think new. The President's asked for an additional $1.35 billion for Race to the Top programs. In light of these developments, we wanted to engage in a project here at Center for American Progress that would dig into Race to the Top and get a better sense of what exactly was happening within the states with these grants. If part of the goal of the program was to be able to try certain things so that we could assess what's working and what's not working, we thought Center for American Progress could do its part by looking state by state and answering those questions and seeing what can we learn from the experiment so far that will help us do even better going forward at, again, reinventing that sense of America's competitive advantage through education and skills training, and reinvent the American dream through that impact on each individual child going through the public school system. Before turning things over to Senior Fellow Ulrich Boser to discuss our findings, I wanted to introduce our amazing panel. We are very lucky to have this morning a distinguished group. We're joined today by Joanne Wise, Chief of Staff to Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, and the Director of the Race to the Top program through its first round. Lillian Lowry, Secretary of Education in Delaware, and the leader of her state's reform efforts under Race to the Top, and Francine Lawrence, Executive Vice President of American Federation of Teachers, and a longtime teaching leader from Toledo, Ohio, right near where my mother grew up in the Sylvania school system. Cindy Brown, Vice President for Education Policy for the Center for American Progress, will be moderating the panel. So I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the participants here who are involved in the education reform debate for joining us today. We look forward to learning more and look forward to you giving us feedback on our new report. With that, I introduce the panel, and thank you very much for your time. Mr. Boser.
Thanks, Tom, for that introduction, and good morning and welcome to you all. I'm Ulrich Boser. I'm a senior fellow here at the Center for American Progress. And as Tom mentioned, we wanted to engage and dig into Race to the Top. We wanted to find out what was working, what was not working, and see what lessons could be learned from what states have done so far. To do this, we enlisted a team of researchers who dug into the states. They dug into the performance reports, they interviewed local experts, they talked to state officials to get a granular sense of precisely what was happening in the states. Before I mention the findings, I do want to tell you about what this report is and what it is not. This report is not summative. Many of the states are still in the middle of their reforms. The report is also not exhaustive. The Department of Education has a 5-year, $18 million research study that is looking at this specific initiative from the Department of Education. And what we wanted to do was say, look, many of these states are a year and a half, some of them are close to 2 years in to Race to the Top. What have we learned so far? What can we say about the successes and things that may not have worked? So among our specific findings, and here we have a clicker, Race to the Top has advanced the reform agenda. Race to the Top has done a lot to move forward Common Core implementation. A lot of states have developed specific training and professional development opportunities around the Common Core. We've also seen then a lot of movement around new teacher evaluations. Our study found that all of the Race to the Top Phase 1 and Phase 2 grantees have either piloted or implemented new teacher evaluation systems. We also found that many states are largely on track with their Race to the Top commitments. And this is important. For the most part, states really are making progress toward their early promises. At the same time, there are some states that have struggled to keep up momentum. This is due to a variety of reasons. Some of them are political missteps, some of them are poor communication efforts, budget cuts and contract disputes delayed implementation of several promises in Hawaii. But even Hawaii has been able to deliver on many of its goals. Hawaii was able, for instance, to increase the rigor of its graduation requirements 2 years earlier than it had promised. In some states, there has been too little collaboration between key stakeholders, and communications really is an issue. We saw this in Hawaii and Florida, among other states, and that this lack of buy-in, this lack of cooperation, has led to delays in implementation. We also found that many states don't do enough to communicate their reforms. Of the states that we looked at, only 5 states posted their monthly updates with the Department of Education online. Another finding was simply that every state has either changed or delayed implementation. Massachusetts has postponed the development of a teacher career ladder. North Carolina has delayed its instructional improvement system, an initiative that aims to help teachers improve classroom practice. Observers also simply worry about the capacity for states to execute, right? So about the quality of implementation given these tight deadlines. So districts in Florida, for instance, began using a new teacher evaluation system in October of 2011. That was just over a year after receiving the grant, and many worry that that has not left enough time for administrators to understand how to use them. We also found that states will almost certainly not accomplish all of the goals in their grants. Many of the states set very, very high goals. Hawaii, as an example, promised that it would erase the achievement gap by 2018. Tennessee made a similar promise that all students would be proficient by the end of the grant. And I don't feel like we're going out on a limb here to say that it seems very, very unlikely that all students in Tennessee are going to be proficient by the end of this grant. And our final finding here, the U.S. Department of Education has played a very important role in monitoring state performance. The department has rejected amendments as well as made it clear that some states are not doing enough to execute their promises. And this approach is new. Historically, the Department of Education has not had either the tools or really the political will to push states in this way. We also heard from a number of states, including Tennessee, that the department has been helpful in terms of rollout, in terms of helping them develop new initiatives. One of the goals of this report was also to benchmark states, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. We evaluated all the states on a number of indicators. We graded on what might be sort of a pass-fail approach. We gave states evaluations that were either they were meeting expectations or they were not meeting expectations. And these indicators, I should add, really emphasize momentum, the degree to which states had the push, the effort to meet these very lofty goals that they set out. I'm going to move quickly through these indicators. The first indicator has the U.S. Department of Education deem the state's performance to be adequate. The Department of Education, of course, has the most granular sense of whether or not the states are, in fact, meeting expectations. And so we gave that a high weight. And we defined a state's performance as satisfactory if it was not placed in a special high-risk category. Second indicator was, does the state have the support of key stakeholders? This indicator has two parts. The first was a state received credit if it did not lose significant district support, and we did not give credit to any state that lost more than 15% of students enrolled in participating school districts. The second part of this indicator was we gave states credit if they maintained the public support of their teachers' union. And we measured that by looking at whether or not the state's teachers' union had either filed a lawsuit or rejected a contract that related to Race to the Top. Third indicator is state spending index. This was an attempt to really capture a state's momentum by the way of its budget. And we examined the rate at which the state was spending down its grant, adjusting the expenditures for the length of time that the state had been working on implementation, as well as the size of the grant. Fourth indicator, has the state piloted or implemented a new teacher evaluation system? Some states were very active themselves in piloting the new teacher evaluation system, and then in other areas like New York, it was local districts that were piloting new teacher evaluation systems. The fifth indicator was the Common Core Planning Index. To evaluate the states on this issue, we relied on data from editorial projects in education and Education First Consulting. And the data looked at the degree to which states had plans, and these were very clear, these were plans to implement the Common Core around three areas, including professional development, curriculum guides, and teacher evaluation systems. And the final indicator, the sixth indicator, Data Systems Index. We created this index relying on state responses to 5 questions from a 2011 state-by-state survey from the Data Quality Campaign. The 5 indicators include things such as which stakeholders have access to student-level longitudinal data. And I should be clear that the data from the Data Quality Campaign is not proxy information for state performance measures. But we do believe that this information helps paint a picture of state implementation and serves as a very reasonable way to benchmark state performance in this area. And as you can see here and in the hard copy of the report, we found that 2 states, Hawaii and Florida, were not meeting expectations as presented against this rubric. Our research then led us to a number of recommendations, which I'll walk us through now. The first is simply that the states should build capacity for reform. States have promised a great deal in their Race to the Top grants. And if states really are serious, if they are serious about achieving these goals, they will need to do a lot more to improve capacity. They need to ensure the fidelity and the quality of their reforms. This means both investing in the people and the technology needed to get these reforms going. States also need to do a lot more to improve communications. Many states have struggled to meet some of their Race to the Top commitments. And the reasons behind these delays vary, right? But one thing does hold them all in common, and that is communications. When states have struggled to a large degree, it has been around issues of communications. And so looking forward, states should do a lot more to honestly communicate both their successes and their failures to stakeholders. And we think that collaboration is going to be key to the success of Race to the Top, and states and districts must do more to create buy-in. In some states, the voices of key stakeholders have not been heard, and states and districts must do more to build a big tent when it comes to Race to the Top implementation. Also, competitive programs do have an impact. This recommendation might seem familiar to many of us policy wonks here in Washington, but it really only underscores the importance. And we hope that this report demonstrates the case for competitive programs and that Congress should support the President's budget and its request for new funding for Race to the Top. And finally, we recommend that the Department of Education should continue to play a strong role in monitoring state performance. The Department of Education should not waver in this regard and both hold states accountable as well as support their implementation. So we're going to move now to a panel discussion and look forward to any questions that you might have.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you here, and glad you're interested in Race to the Top and how it's doing. We're very excited about this report that we're releasing today, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with these four folks, all of whom have been very connected with Race to the Top. So I want to start by asking Fran. Fran is from a state that won Race to the Top, but she also, in her new role, relatively new role as Executive Secretary of the AFT, gets to interact with folks around the country. So Ulrich talked about the importance of collaboration and communication. What do you see is going on about this and how important it is to the success to Race to the Top?
Well, collaboration is important to the success of any initiative. I know that from all of my personal experience as a teacher and as a teacher leader. But first, I want to thank you and your colleagues for the opportunity to be part of this panel and comment on the report. And it is important that we monitor Race to the Top. And this report is one of many, undoubtedly, that will contribute to that effort. As I have reviewed what you have produced, the state profiles are good descriptions of works in progress, and I underline that, works in progress, and Race to the Top is just that. It's a work in progress. But the report is about policy enactment, not practice and implementation. And we know that implementation is absolutely the key if Race to the Top is going to succeed. So the report does a good job telling us about policies that have changed at obviously the federal level and the state level, and that states have a plan for implementing Common Core, and states have changed laws to deal with teacher evaluation, and that big data systems are being built, and I emphasize are being built. But any education reform, Race to the Top included, has to be about what happens in the classrooms with teachers and with students. So many AFT affiliates supported Race to the Top applications because we embraced the promise of Race to the Top. We believe that Race to the Top would be a lever in advancing the Common Core standards and assessments, and educators want the conditions and the opportunity to get their students ready for college and career standards. And then another example, we believe that many, if not most, teacher evaluation systems needed to be reformed, and that good evaluation systems that incorporated support for teachers would be helpful and translate into better teacher practice. And we hope that the money spent on data systems would lead to teachers at the school level, getting information about their students' performance in a timely manner. So overall, many of these haven't been proven to be true so far at the local level. But we're trying to make it work, and it's a teacher's inclination to always try to find solutions to help their students. But the AFT is working in collaboration with our state and local affiliates. We were successful in securing an I-3 grant, and so many of our affiliates in New York and Rhode Island are about building a robust teacher evaluation and support system. Volusia, Florida comes to mind. They're embarking this year under this framework on a peer review program. Massachusetts, now that's a state affiliate that originally did not partner with the state in its application, but have been very involved in not just monitoring, but working in partnership with the State Department. So we feel that collaboration means ownership. And when local leaders with teacher unions and with classroom teachers collaborate and feel ownership, that is the key to successful implementation. So it's an absolutely key area and a very important recommendation.
Great. So Lillian, you're overseeing the implementation of the Race to the Top grant in Delaware, and of course, implementation goes beyond proposals and planning. How's it been going in Delaware, particularly around these collaboration and communication efforts?
It has been going very well, and the collaboration starts at the top. We have a governor who is completely immersed in the work. We meet with him quarterly to give him updates, and when I talk about we, I'm talking about the Delaware State Education Association as well as Department of Education and superintendents. One of the things that we did that really fostered collaboration in a most positive way, and we're getting enormously positive feedback about, is to put in data coaches and development coaches. A part of our state reform effort was to make sure that every school in our state had 90 minutes of unencumbered time for teachers to work together in a professional learning community. We would not sign off on their plans until they at the local level had figured it out. We did not dictate how they did it. We simply said it has to be done. They did it, and they have the pushback that we got initially, as you talk a little bit about Massachusetts, about encroaching on their planning time, has melted away. Teachers are saying this is one of the most powerful professional development opportunities they've ever had, because they actually are able to sit with each other and talk about the work, to share strategies, to observe each other, to participate in instructional walkthroughs with administrators and have a kind of dynamic conversation among those who are all engaged, from the administrator, the evaluator, to the teacher and the evaluatee. So these professional learning communities then morphed into our administrators forming professional learning communities, so they could talk more about the work and how they inform teachers about the work. With that in mind, data coaches were for teachers. We also brought on development coaches for administrators, because as we were rolling out the new evaluation system, one of the concerns that our teachers had is that there was consistent implementation. And so we brought in development coaches to work with our administrators to make sure that they were implementing with fidelity across the board, from district to district, the protocols in a most profound way. And that has also morphed into another kind of support for administrators that we did not envision at first. But these people who are former superintendents, former principals, systems thinkers that are coming from other businesses into education to help us think through how we put systems in place, have just been really powerful in helping us rethink through professional learning communities how powerful they could actually be. And finally, I think one of the most collaborative things that we've done is that we did not have measures for non-tested subjects and grades. We had those tested subjects and grades as required by the United States Department of Education and our government and our state. What we didn't have was those, and that was about 75% of our teachers. So what we had to do was make sure that we worked in collaboration with the department to be thoughtful about how we moved forward so that we could keep people collaboratively working. there have been over 400 teachers in our state who have worked with us, K to 12 in every content area. We're looking at 33 content areas to build out these measures that will be used. And they're doing pre and post assessments. I will tell you that I took the one for pre-K music and I was basic. So, but the teacher said it wasn't that I hadn't mastered the objectives, but that I had to grow. So that was a good thing to know. But we have had letters to the editor as a result of that, saying that that too has been some of the most profound professional development they had, because they had to know what the standards are, those Common Core standards. They had to really get their heads around them. They had to know what the job descriptions are and understand. I'm talking now from an administrative point of view. So if we are pulling a nurse to do something, we realize that we're taking them away from doing other things that can holistically support students. I could go on and on about the collaboration in Delaware. It's a hallmark in the state. It always has been, but it has been very beneficial, the collaboration and the way it is done around relationships in Delaware to moving the work forward.
Well, we also know you can get a little tough because you had a hiccup with one district, I believe, and
the irony of that, it was the former district of which I was superintendent. So I had worked with those leaders and teachers and board members. So it was around the persistently low performing schools. We have deemed ours the partnership zone. And it was one of the schools, one of the high schools. And although our schools chose a transformation model where the leader is removed, they actually did a hybrid, because both of the schools, all four of the schools in the first round went with all teachers reapplying, or at least having critical conversations with the administrator to say, this is the work we're going to do. Here's the plan that's been approved. Are you in or are you out? And so the teachers at this particular school decided that they would all re-interview. I mean, we did it all in collaboration with them. And so when reality set in, that as a result of the interviews, a significant number of teachers were not selected to come back, they wanted a do-over. And so this is a part of, I think, what has been talked about early on about taking risks and making sure that this is not the way we used to do it. This is a new culture of how we say we're going to do something and we have to follow through on exactly what we said we're going to do. So there was a possibility that they were going to lose the funding. And I think we got support. I know we got support from every level. Other educators in the state stepped up to support us. Our governor, of course, was out front. Secretary Duncan was very supportive, and our business community and nonprofit organizations that have been tremendously supportive fiscally to our schools, and that school in particular started writing letters to the editor. So they backed off. They have a good plan. Things are going well. Teachers were given other opportunities. We worked with them in the district to make sure that we followed the protocols around what the move looked like, but they had to move because that's what we agreed to, and that was the result.
Wow. So you talk about risk-taking. Joanne, the whole Race to the Top program is a risk. Pretty substantial, unique proposal made to Congress at a time when, through the stimulus, at a time when the country was suffering pretty serious fiscal problems. But you've also, and we got through the process, it's gone pretty well, but the department is behaving differently, acting differently around implementation. It's not the Department of Education I knew. I was once in it, and many years ago, not this administration. And talk a little bit about the steps you're taking around implementation and monitoring. I think they're pretty unique.
Well, I mean, I will sort of echo what Fran said, which is it's really all about implementation. In the end, the program is a success or not a success depending on whether we're really successful with the kids in each of these states. So that's the bottom line. And historically, that has not been the way that the Department of Education or state education agencies have viewed our jobs, I think. And we felt like if we were going to be talking the talk, we also needed to walk the walk, and we needed to look in the mirror and say, if we're really serious about changing things for kids on the ground, it needs to start with us at the U.S. Department of Education. So we took a long, hard look at all of our policies around how we, when we give money out, And Race to the Top is really piloting something that we're thinking and trying to sort of make what we call the pointy edge of the spear internally. Like, we've got to do this across the whole department, but we're starting with the Race to the Top states, really thinking about what it means to do two things simultaneously: hold grantees accountable for delivering on the outcomes that they said they would deliver in the grants, and helping them be successful at doing that. In the past, we held them accountable for compliance, meaning, did you send me the report, and did you check the right boxes on the report, and did you fill it out properly, which is very different from holding people accountable for outcomes. And we didn't think it was our job to particularly ensure the success. We still see that in some of our grants, where we're doing a big implementation review across a lot of our programs right now, and we see departments whose job it is, whose job they think it is to sort of get grantees from non-compliance to compliance, and then we internally give ourselves a check mark and are done. And we're saying, no, 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 no. The check mark comes when people move from compliance to really deep implementation that results in success. So as a result of that, we've been doing a lot of things very differently, and I think you heard amendments alluded to. We started entertaining amendments from Race to the Top states, and the first thing that we saw in the press was slapping us on the wrist for the fact that we weren't holding states accountable. And we were saying, no, this is a big, complicated, multi-year grant. It is undoubtedly true that as people get into implementation, they're going to find that some things work better than they thought, other things aren't working the way they thought. We're holding people responsible for outcomes, and if they've got a different way that's credible that they think they should take to get there, we're going to be listening to that. And sometimes we'll say yes, and sometimes we'll say, I don't think that actually is going to be something that's going to result in those outcomes being better for kids. So we're having those hard conversations with states, and I think Lillian's got examples of both of those things that she's gone through with us in Delaware alone, and it's certainly true in a lot of the states. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make program managers look much more holistically at the success of a particular state, feel vested in that success, but at the same time hold them accountable for the outcomes.
So I don't want you to necessarily name a state, but what's an example of something, a modification that was asked for that you didn't grant? Or was that sort of a pattern? Was there a certain kind of request that you had to say, no, folks, you've got to figure a different way around this?
Well, I mean, perhaps the one that Lillian's talking about with the non-tested subjects and grades is a good sort of example, because it's kind of got the pluses and the minuses. They came in wanting us to really extend deadlines in order to allow them to collaborate in the development of the way to think about evaluating teachers in non-tested subjects and grades, which is a really complicated issue. On the other hand, we came back and said, how do we know you're really going to get it done? How do we know it only takes, how do we know that this length of extension that you've asked for is real, and that you're not going to, in a year, come back and say, now we need another year? And so we talked long and hard with the folks from Delaware and put together, I think, a pretty detailed roadmap over the course of the year with milestones they have to meet along the way, and at the front end, a pretty explicit, big financial penalty if they don't get there by the end of this year. So that's one example, but there have been others.
And within that, we also, based on a collaborative request, asked if we could change the definition of highly effective as that work was going on, and they said flat out, no. You can't. We're not moving the ball completely. The quality, to Joanne's point earlier, is about the children, and highly effective means that those teachers are moving a significant number of students to proficiency in a short amount of time, and they made us stick to that.
So, Ulrich, when you talked about the report, you talked about our judgments about these states, but there's basically the bulk of the report are profiles of the states that they're 2 and 3 pages, and they bring sort of a human quality to it. Can you talk a little bit about what we did there and some of the findings or comments from people that stick out in your mind?
Sure. So I think we were very aware that we would strive to get at implementation issues, but that they would be beyond our reach, right? I mean, for issues of timing, right? Many of the states are still doing this work right now. And then also simply we didn't simply have our own capacity to do that. So we wanted to evaluate the states against the metrics which I spoke about, but then give a qualitative sense of really what was happening in classrooms, in schools across the states. And a lot of interesting findings from that. They underpin our main findings for the report, but they also give a lot of color to what's happening. To a school administrator in Delaware who now says that because of the changes in teacher evaluation systems, his Outlook calendar now hates him. He simply cannot find enough time in the day to do all the things that he's going to do. And he says this somewhat, tongue-in-cheek, but I think a real kind of concrete sign that many of us are familiar with, trying to do things differently to try and make enough time in the day. But also then things that we found in common across the states, like the race to the top brand. I mean, I think here sitting in Washington, we see this as a federal initiative, but in many areas, New York in particular, this is no longer seen as a federal reform effort. It's really seen as something local. Folks at the ground level and newspapers and blog posts and in classrooms and teachers aren't talking about race to the top. They're talking about the state's reform initiative. And I think that's very, very important to realize how, and this is happening in different states, but how that's taking place and rolling out differently in the states.
So we urge you all to look at these profiles. They're pretty interesting with a number of quotes from people that we interviewed in each of the states. So Fran, it's early in Race to the Top, but are you seeing changes in some of these states in teaching and learning?
Well, that's a good question. I want to back up for just a second to this previous discussion. One of the observations is that competition inspires change, and competition and collaboration aren't necessarily compatible. And some of the examples I gave in my initial comments simply would not have happened without genuine collaboration. So I think it's important that as studies occur, that reports take into consideration on-the-ground implementation and collaboration. And I'd also observe on that many of our local affiliates and state affiliates, American Federation of Teachers, signed off initially with state departments of education. And so collaboration depends on trust, and the trust is the terms you sign off on move forward, only to find that as time transpired, policymakers within the state unilaterally changed some of the terms. So that has, in some cases, impeded and threatened collaboration. Around teaching and learning, Race to the Top will never be deemed, no matter what time frame, now or in the future, as a success based on just policies that have changed or the awarding of X number of millions of dollars. The big question is going to be, will it improve teacher practice and student learning? So teachers on the ground take a different view than state or federal policymakers. And as I said, this report is really about, have policies changed? Our members know that focusing on career and college-ready standards are important, but many would say that at the classroom and the school building level, Race to the Top hasn't supported that to the degree that it has promised thus far. As it's proceeded, it has doubled down on the test culture created by No Child Left Behind. Students continue to have a narrow curricula because of the testing culture. Often teachers are forced to teach to scripted lessons, and the labeling of teachers is not seen as an effective reform. And it absolutely contradicts the notion of school improvement and improving teacher practice. And many teachers would say that they're spending more time preparing for tests, more time prepping for evaluations, and in many cases, students with the greatest needs, social, health, or academic, aren't being addressed by the enactment of the new policies. So many of the promises of Race to the Top, such as helping teachers continuously improve, which is so important, or the opportunities for new roles for teacher leadership, have not materialized yet. And we should all be sobered by the recent MetLife survey of America's teachers, quite extensive, but it shows that teachers have the lowest level of job satisfaction in more than 2 decades, and that a growing number are leaving the profession. That is of extreme concern to leaders of the American Federation of Teachers nationally at the state and local level. So programs like Race to the Top and other punitive measures to school improvement are taking the toll, and honestly, teachers don't see a brighter future. And there's an interesting publication by Michael Fullen that talks about using the right drivers for reform. And I think that's really important. His paper is entitled Wrong Drivers. So, while it's important to have studies like this, there's $1 million mathematical evaluation of the program. People on the ground, educators and students, are being held accountable in real time. They're being looked at now in terms of what they are producing. The evaluation of what they produce is happening now. It's not delayed 3 to 5 years as some of these evaluation studies are being rolled out. The rollout of the Common Core, the data systems. Our feedback is that data systems are being built at the state level, but they really haven't gone yet to the local school and classroom level, and that's where it's needed so that teachers have really good information to inform their instruction and their interventions. That is what teaching and learning, that's how teaching and learning improve. And in many cases, teacher evaluation systems are being slapped together. I thought one of the best quotes in the state profiles came from a colleague of mine who said that the construction of teacher evaluation systems right now in many places is like building a plane while flying it, and we're being asked to take a boarding pass. Teacher evaluation is so complex. Multiple measures are needed, and right now the propensity is to look to what's an easy grab, a fixed, concrete, standardized test score, the test not designed for evaluation purposes, and to avoid the more complex and lengthy time period that it takes to design multiple measures. So we need to work together to create an improvement agenda that is systematic and that builds capacity for all educators, and especially at the local district level.
Well, it is a time of tremendous change, and the change is probably going faster in the race to the top states. I mean, we are bringing online the Common Core. We have big assessment, the two big assessment consortia that are developing new kinds of tests that will implement the Common Core in English language arts and math. And then Lillian described working in her state in non-graded subject testing. So I think you're absolutely right about teacher discomfort, because change is uncomfortable for all of us. And but I think we are going to have to, as a country, improve our student outcomes, and hopefully this change process can lead to that. Joanne, do you see in Delaware, it looks like the data is getting down to the school level with your data coaches. Are other states doing things like that?
Yeah, I mean, most states, the answer is yes. Some of them, the answer is not yet. It very much, I think, needs to. I also think that we are, as you said, Cindy, in a tough period of time right now as we're going through a lot of change. And we don't know the right answers. We know that a lot of the things we have been doing don't work. It's one of the reasons that the technical assistance that we're doing is trying to focus as much as possible on building communities of practice across states, and that we're really encouraging states to be doing it across districts and districts to be doing it across their schools, because the answers to a lot of these problems lie in the expertise in our states, districts, and classrooms. They're not things that external experts have the answer to, or the paper that if only we adopted the recommendations in this paper, we would solve all the problems. These are very real questions right now that we're all working our way through. And I think that we don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We have to keep walking forward, even though it's a little foggy right now, to figure these things out. But it's the reason that we need teachers at the table. They are the experts in a lot of these things. It's the reason that we need the district folks at the table. They're experts in a lot of these areas. We've got to get the right voices in the table to create these solutions together, because we don't know what all the right answers are, but it shouldn't stop us from moving forward and trying.
Right, and there's no question, we found in our report that the working out the teacher evaluation stuff has been the most difficult for the states. I think they're all delayed in one way or another around it. I think there's if only we could get state legislators to sit still for a minute and look at some of the really thoughtful research and recommendations that have come out from many sources, and to really be serious about collaboration with teachers. So, Fran, you're a leader. I'm not sure everyone in the audience knows this. We didn't say this in the introduction. You and your husband in Toledo were leaders in developing peer evaluation systems where teachers are involved in the evaluations of teachers. And we started 20 years ago, something like that. And
Only 30 now.
30. And only now has it really become serious point of discussion, I think, nationwide. Because as we go forward with teacher evaluation, principals can't do it all. I mean, there's not enough time in the day to do the kind of thorough evaluation. Can you, have you, first of all, in Ohio, where you're from, has it spread more than beyond Toledo? And secondly, what are you seeing nationwide about peer evaluation as part of developing new kinds of teacher evaluation?
Well, peer evaluation exists in well over 100 districts throughout the country. And I agree with your observation. There is more interest now because of the focus nationally on teacher evaluation. Peer evaluation is fundamental to building a real profession, and one that you think of the prototypical professions, medicine and law, where the practitioners develop the standards and enforce them and hold their colleagues accountable. It is powerful. And it goes back to the ownership issue. And when there's ownership, teachers are very willing to be responsible and accountable. So peer evaluation is a tremendous way to move ahead the profession. And you mentioned risk-taking and changing. You know, change is inoperative now, and we don't shy away from it. The American Federation of Teachers is working with states and locals and is prompting change and changing the thoughts of how we go about this with our leaders. But for change to happen and to be successful, our people have to be able to operate in a relatively safe environment, because you take risks. And while taking those risks, if they're going to be held up to public ridicule when the outcomes aren't always where we want them each year, it makes people back off and resist change. So it's important that, yes, we promote change and we endorse that, but that we create the conditions and the tools for teachers and other educators to be able to take risks in an environment that allows risks to happen in order to invent and find new solutions.
So is peer evaluation being discussed in Delaware?
Yes, it is. Especially as the professional learning communities evolve and teachers are more and more participating in the instructional walkthroughs with administrators, to Fran's point, they are the content experts. Our administrators may have been teachers in one particular area, so knowing a breadth of knowledgeable facts about all kinds of subject matter is a stretch for them. They've got to use the expertise of the teachers. We are certainly having that discussion and moving in that direction.
So one of the places that's had a really tough time with teacher evaluation is Hawaii. Do you have any predictions, Joanne, about how Hawaii's going to fare? Are they making some progress, or are they still bumping along?
So we, as you know, we put them on high-risk status a couple of months ago, which for us means that they can't spend their money without getting prior approval from us. So it's like being on a reimbursement status. And it means they have to check in with us pretty frequently whenever they're thinking of doing something else. And it's because we are very, very concerned with their ability to implement. I think they've shown that they can do some design work very well, but the implementation side is way behind across every area, not just teacher evaluation. Our team is out there this week doing an on-site review, so we should know more in the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
Maybe that's a place we can go and do a case study together.
Well, notice Joanne's here. So, all right, policy wonk question. competitive programs. What do we see as the federal role with competitive programs?
I think it's important to acknowledge, right, that the stakes are really high. I mean, right now, most fourth graders are not proficient at reading. Most eighth graders are not proficient at math. We have hundreds of dropout dropout factories that dot the nation. And so trying to inspire reform and new ways of doing things is going to be very important. We've been at reform for a long time. We haven't seen the results that we need to have a robust middle class. And competitive education programs allow a way, whether they're the teacher incentive fund or Race to the Top or the president's proposal around the Respect program, allow ways to innovate, allow ways to try things differently. And we're going to need to improve the rate of improvement in American education and figure out better ways to do things. And competitive programs provide a role for that, are a real vehicle to inspire change. And we've seen that even before Race to the Top really began, with the states, many states passing laws and doing things differently. And we think that that's going to be important. I think that's going to be very important going forward.
Well, and the AFT, and I believe the NEA too, you have your innovation fund where even you encourage competition among some of your members, and I know that's gone quite well, I think.
Well, right, the American, Randy Weingarten's initial signature program when she became president of the AFT is the Innovation Fund, and it's designed to provide sizable grants to local affiliates, local federations, so that experimentation and change and pilots can occur at the grassroots level. And it really reinforces comments we've all said in a different way, where people who are expected to implement are designing. One that I know well is in the district I came from. We have a grant that's looking at multiple, in Toledo, measures to judge student learning, and likewise then to tie that into compensation systems for teachers. But it's very complex because there's only 2 subjects areas that are tested in the state, only some grade levels. So the vast majority of teachers there and really throughout the country aren't teaching at grade levels or subjects that are tested. And looking at other than standardized test scores, multiple measures is so important, but it takes time and a lot of dedication from classroom practitioners, which we're doing to help design that. But that Innovation Fund has awarded grants throughout the country, also in New York and Rhode Island to supplement the I3 grant, designing teacher evaluation systems so that we're looking for time, not to delay change, but we need to have time to design systems properly so that they're not being designed and implemented at the same time. And sometimes the emphasis is, to get it done rather than get it done right.
Do you say, John, are the Race to the Top states actually doing this more thoughtfully than some of the others, or is it difficult to make a judgment like that?
I don't know. I mean, the thing that I think has surprised all of us is how much the states that, even the ones that didn't win Race to the Top, just by virtue of putting plans together and getting a blueprint that a lot of people across their state have bought into, have kept walking down that path. So I think some of the leaders in this are Race to the Top states, but there's also non-Race to the Top states that are doing a lot of thoughtful work in this area.
Yeah, actually, Illinois comes to mind, and Colorado. I think they've moved forward with certainly some vigorous debate, but not the kind of disarray and disagreement that other states have had. I was interested, Lillian, and you're talking about sort of planning time for administrators. Do you bring them together? Are you saying that the superintendents throughout the state come together to talk about
Actually, the superintendents come together twice a month. They come together with us, and we completely revamped our meetings with the superintendents. They even get continuing education units for it now because it is professional development. Each meeting that we have with the chief, we go through some aspect of our reform plan that is supposed to be implemented and walk them through it and give them data because we have a great data system and we can give them feedback and they can verify whether the data we have are the right data or not. But they also bring a team. For example, we are the first state to give SAT in the school day to all juniors. That was a complement of the Race to the Top funding. At the opening meeting for the school year, we had ETS there, College Board there, to go over those data and to talk about our student results and how that implicated college-going readiness. And so at that particular meeting, the superintendents came with their HR directors, some high school counselors, and high school principals and middle school principals. So when they come, not only do they meet with us every month, it depends on the topic, the personnel they bring with them. Because we know that the chiefs are the leaders and the sellers of the program, the cheerleaders, if you will, the people on the ground who do the work need to be grounded in it as well. And then they have their own meetings to kind of coalesce around operational ways of sharing resources. So it's really powerful.
Of course, in a state the size of Delaware, you're able to do that. I wonder what they do.
They're doing it regionally in a lot of larger
Are they?
states.
That's what I
Yeah,
wondered.
Absolutely.
Right.
So there is a level of communication and collaboration, but across
I mean,
districts.
again, it varies in terms of its effectiveness. This is hard to do. The fact that they can do it with the kind of resources that Lillian has at her state education agency makes the quality, I think, of what they're doing good. It's not always the case in some of the other places, but it's certainly the goal, I think.
And then, how many districts in Delaware? About
19.
19, and I think of Ohio that has 613, I think.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, so, you're
Right.
really comparing two different, enormously different in size.
But to Joanne's point, I had the privilege of going to their Race to the Top convening in Ohio. They have hired people. Yeah, they've hired really
Yeah.
good people in those regions who are giving the collective story.
And I noticed one of the attributes you rated on was communication, putting online the reports, and that seems like such an easy feature to do. I know in Ohio and others, they absolutely put online their reports to the federal government, and others don't. And, that's one way of communicating. It's
Yeah.
not person to person, but certainly
Yeah, and then
that
for
should be
us-
expected.
For us, that was really just sort of one example that we could quantify. And when you visit the Race to the Top websites or speaking to people, I think the communications really is all over the board, whether it's about local initiatives or really the state of reform in this state. But yes, that was exactly our thought there, was that this is a very easy thing. The department has a form that you fill out, and it's a very easy way to communicate to the public what's going on.
Yeah, this is really a discussion about Race to the Top, but I'll throw waivers into the mix a little bit. And Joanne, I'm interested, because where you sit. We've done a couple of studies of state education agencies. I spent 15 years working with chief state school officers at CCSSO. And the capacity of state education agencies has been a concern of some of us for quite some time. Have these major federal initiatives brought change in the strength and type of operations that SEAs are engaged in?
I mean, I think that is, I don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be, but I think unequivocally you can see that a really strong level of talent is being attracted into
Right,
state
that's what I
education
wondered.
agencies that we haven't seen in a while. They're reorganizing themselves around what the services are that they need to provide to districts, which isn't even how people were thinking about their work in many states before. So I think it is certainly getting states to think about what the job of the state education agency is in helping their districts succeed with each of their students. And that alone is a good thing. And you're starting to see them act on it both in terms of the talent they recruit and the way they're organizing their work. So I think we have a long way to go, but I think that's one of the most hopeful things that we're seeing, that the sort of rejuvenation of these organizations.
And Race to the Top helped. Couldn't they use some of their money to expand staff?
In Delaware and in many other states, we actually built a unit, one around teacher leader effectiveness, one around delivery. Okay, so we've got this plan, how do we deliver on the promise? And the other around the state turnarounds for the persistent low achieving schools. And to Joanne's point, because so many people are excited about this work and this level of commitment from the highest levels, we have attracted some phenomenal talent in our state, just phenomenal talent.
That's true.
I was interested in the discussion of professional development. That's a high interest level of mine. I just learned recently that there were robust plans, teachers involved in Rhode Island for professional development, and then it was all put on hold because the funding was cut short. You know, it's so important as we move forward that adequate funding is there. Teachers need to be involved in designing and implementing professional development, and we need to have the funds to roll it out. And as locals and states look at cuts coming from the state level and the federal level, people are being told the title budgets are going to shrink next year. It will impair the rollout of professional development in many areas, and that's certainly key to the Common Core Standards effort.
We all hope the title aren't cut, but we're going to work on that, as I'm sure you are from the national level. Yeah.
Capacity. With our data coaches, everyone knew coming in that our data coaches would only be there for 2 years. And the point is they build capacity. So if they're meeting 90 minutes per week, unencumbered time, pulling the data, helping teachers determine how to best use data to make decisions, and not just proficiency data, but attendance data, discipline data, all those data that surround students. They are training the teachers. Teachers, we become the experts. So when the data coaches move away, we have a state full of teachers who have lived through 2 years of this training, who now have the capacity to implement professional learning communities based on data-informed thinking like they've never done before. And it would be incumbent upon the LEAs to make sure as new teachers come in, those veteran teachers there don't take for granted that they know this, but they do the coach-to-coach model and bring all the teachers up to speed.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer model is so valuable.
Right.
That is a tremendous example when it's peer-to-peer coaching around data and other issues of building capacity that sustains.
Who are the data coaches? I mean, were they former teachers, or are they teachers who will then return?
Our data coaches through an RFP process, a request for proposal process, and Wireless Generation is the external partner who is leading that work. And they are former superintendents, they are former principals, they are from all over the United States. They're not just Delawareans. They are really amazing, sharp people. So.
Now, the best kinds of coaches, whether it's for data or math instruction or literacy, that I've observed come right from the teacher ranks. And the AFT invests a lot of our funding in training teachers who can go back and train other teachers to build capacity. You know, I was interested to learn that I believe, Joanne, that for the Race to the Top, 50% is allocated out to the districts, 50% can remain at the state level. That in Florida, 95% of the state level is allocated outside vendors. Now, to me, that just contradicts building internal capacity. And you're investing that funding in people who are so far removed from districts, schools, and classrooms. I'd much rather see it invested in people who are closest to teaching and learning.
Yeah, in Massachusetts, though, for example, when they put out their contract to do professional development for their staff across the state on their new teacher evaluation system, the NEA there bid on the contract and won. So the NEA in the state, the local affiliate, is one of the 3 contractors, I think, in the state who are doing this training. So it's coming in lots of different forms. And it's just interesting to see. But I agree, the goal is to really build the capacity, not do sort of a one-time shot and then disappear, unless that one-time shot is about building the capacity and has a sustainability plan behind it.
Right. Well, I hope the research that the big, is it Mathematica that's going to do the research, is going to look at things like this. I don't know. Is that part of the research design? It's beyond. I mean, I think that this is a fascinating exchange we just had. It's way beyond something the Center for American Progress could do, but it needs to be done.
Yes, I think their goal is to look at examples of successful practice as well as looking at the data that's around it, but we'll see.
Well, and the variety of approaches. I mean, I think we're slowly but surely getting away in this country from this notion there's one right way to do everything connected with public education, and that
and the waivers are another really interesting example of this as well.
Right. I mean, the fact that you were doing peer evaluation 30 years ago, and it's only now starting to take off.
It's a real culture change. Because it contradicts what the top-down style of management and operation within school systems. And like I said, it really transforms the occupation of teaching to one of being a real profession.
And if I could make one point to Fran's, just to reiterate what Fran said, when we went into the data coach model, we went in thinking 60% of them would need direct facilitation from the data coach, and 40% could do the coach-to-coach model. It is the inverse. 60% of them are doing coach-to-coach with teachers on the ground, because some of our districts were far more progressive around professional learning communities than the state even knew. They were just doing this on their own with visionary leaders. So that coach-to-coach model has proven to be really, really powerful, and already has said that we have the capacity in our state. We just needed to hone in on that capacity and build it out. So.
Comment. So I want to open it to the audience, and Billy will take his mic around. We'll start here.
Yeah, my name is Li Yang, independent TV program producers. I just think about this education program. I think the first is about the evaluation of the criteria of the improvement, whether it is by test score or there are other criteria can be possible. For instance, there's maybe math or maybe value, or they say the ethic value or the moral value to teach a student or administrative staff, whether this is built in the program. And second is whether this should be done by state level rather than using the federal taxpayers' money to go almost everywhere rather than to the disadvantaged school district. Maybe this would be more effective and more meaningful in terms of the federal budget.
Okay, so one's about targeting of funds, I think, and
You want to just recap that, please, for us?
So one was, I think, about the criteria in the program,
Right,
and whether you can
of
have more than
success.
just math and reading test scores. That
Right.
was your first question, right? Yes.
other
Right, and then another
criteria. Right,
question.
right.
One about the criteria, and then one about where's the spending best done.
Right.
So on the test score one, the criteria were that multiple measures must be used to determine the effectiveness of teaching practice. And so in things that are tested, test scores need to be, or student growth, student learning, gains over time needs to be one of the factors used, but it's one of multiple factors, and states, and in many cases states devolve this down to the district level, need to figure out for them what the right sort of model is. So the program didn't dictate what those criteria were.
Why don't you use the budget, use the existing model, whoever doing the best job for the disadvantaged area, rather than let everybody design everything but ignore the disadvantaged area, you go nowhere.
But that isn't, I don't think that's
No.
being
Right.
done at all.
No,
There.
we are not. A lot of the targeted funding is to improve student achievement in persistently low achieving schools. And when we give out the funding formula, it's based on disadvantaged students, free and reduced. So, I mean, that's a targeted group.
Right.
I think, back there.
Hello, my name is Robin Brazeley. I'm with New Initiatives Alliance, Hempstead School District, Long Island. We have been a persistently low achieving school and district since they started measuring it. So I think I resigned from the district and ran for the board in 1989, and we were trying to get help in changing our schools. I'm here today because I wanted to, I respect the work of Cynthia so much, and I wanted to hear this, but I wanted to ask what specifically is being done in suburban school districts like mine It's a single district with a single high school. It levies its own taxes. It's outside of New York City. We have no think tanks. We have no major efforts. We are being left behind. We're not even at the starting gate for Race to the Top. And I am very concerned because for 25 years, my adult life, we have blamed parents, teachers, and students. When will states not only meet with superintendents and district level administrators, but evaluate them and hold them to the same kind of measure that you are now pressing on teachers and students? And what can be done so that, I guess, grassroots efforts, because when you take funding away in districts like mine in Long Island, it's passed to the taxpayer. So there is never an accountability measure that actually gets to the source of the learning environment. Teaching and learning must take place in an effective teaching and learning environment. The climate must exist. And you are asking people to evaluate teachers and students who should be evaluated themselves. When will the pressure come up, come up the chain? We have to reach a place where we decide that the students who are being denied diplomas because they're not passing these tests, or now teachers who will be losing their jobs, but you are being administered in environments where often they don't even understand the difference between cohort and grade. So there's a very big disconnect between rooms like this and policy-rich environments like this and grassroots classrooms where black and brown children, often with black and brown leadership, are being denied an opportunity for education. And when we get to the point where it will matter, we change the rules. So what is being done for that? What can be done for that?
That's a good question. The situation in Hempstead, you're right, is shameful, and it has been for a long time, and with little demonstrated progress. And thank you for talking about a district like Hempstead. And the administration's proposals around ESEA, I think you wanted to strengthen the accountability for districts and administrators. Are any of the Race to the Top states doing that? Are you doing it?
We are, just as the teachers are engaged on the classroom performance, the principals are engaged on the school performance, the superintendents are engaged on the district performance. So when we put our evaluation process in place, there's an evaluation for administrators. The ones with the superintendents, we are working with the Delaware State Boards Association to figure out what that means, but our superintendents welcome it. I mean, so we are having the discussion at every level with the building leaders and the specialists who support from the district office already in the queue with the teachers.
And so we found also in the Race to the Top states, a lot of talk about new principal evaluation systems, how they're being piloted, again, in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and different approaches, because teacher evaluation has been more controversial. That was something that I think that we've highlighted in this talk here, but if you look through the report itself, it talks in many of the states in detail about how those new evaluation systems are being rolled out in states other than Delaware as well.
It's going to be interesting to see how Delaware does. I mean, the governance issues around poor performing superintendents are going to be interesting. Fran, you want to?
Well, I think the questions are right on target in a couple ways. First of all, school climate is so important. The climate, a positive, constructive climate has to exist in order to give teachers and students the opportunities to teach and learn. And effective teachers will not voluntarily go to a school where the school climate isn't positive. And that means a safe, secure environment. It means one where there's genuine partnership and collaboration, where the building's well managed. We know of...
Where the needs of the students are at the center of all the decisions that they're making about how they're going to organize their time together. And
exactly, and that means that teachers are a vital part of the decision making. They're focusing on that, where they have the data and the resources necessary to analyze that and to inform instruction. But we have many experiences where there could be financial incentives for teachers, highly qualified teachers, to move to challenging schools, and they turn their back on the financial incentive because the school climate is not positive. Then the other aspect of your question on accountability, teachers in the field generally do not see the kind of accountability measures being applied to administrators that are being applied to teachers. And it absolutely has to be a focus as we move forward.
With the beginning of the standard movement, this conversation was included behind or within the opportunity to learn. And the opportunity to learn standard was the one that we left behind. But what we're seeing, and I think you hit it on the head, if you don't have solid district leadership, on what basis are you holding building level, teachers and students accountable? So we put in my district where you have institutional poor performance, we don't have a way out. And I think that's the urgency, and I'm sure we're not the only district in America. There must be inner ring suburbs that don't have city resources that are being left behind as well. But we're not in the race to the top. And I think if you all would agree to spend some time finding us and helping us get in the race, it would be very beneficial to the nation.
Well
But it's
put.
an opportunity to learn that we don't have.
Well put. Any other comments? Math guy.
Jerome Dances. I'm a retired mathematics professor. And the view from the colleges is that students are showing up knowing considerably less arithmetic and Algebra 1 than they did 20 years ago. And we know that the reason is that there's been tremendous reform in the schools, which have greatly reduced the time allocated to the teaching of arithmetic and algebra, and this has been highly financed by the Department of Education.
Your question?
My question is actually on the teacher evaluation. Governor Clinton, when he removed the really ineffective teachers in the state of Arkansas in the 80s by insisting that all the licensed teachers in Arkansas take an arithmetic and reading test on the grade 8 level. And this enabled him to remove the 10% least effective teachers in the state of Arkansas. So, the question is, to what extent is Race to the Top encouraging states, or our states, raising their licensing, raising the level of the licensing exams to ensure that teachers will know content, as opposed to using the really low bar Praxis 2 exams.
Yeah. Okay.
And-
So I think that's an interesting question. Has there been a change in the accreditation standard?
We have started reviewing we have a professional standards board in the state of Delaware that looks at licensure, and we have begun to change several criteria for licensing certain teachers. I don't want to start naming names and then miss something and get it wrong, but I can tell you, and that is a professional standards board made up of teachers who are raising the bar. That's not the department telling them what they need to do. These are teachers, because what our teachers believed and said it from the very beginning of the Race to the Top process was, let's look at who's coming in the door so that we don't have to do all of this work once they're in the classroom working with our students. So our teachers are very much centered on the very question that you've asked. They want to raise the bar.
I think the one thing to just add is that we're just, I think that there's, when we talk about professional development, there's sort of easy sort of training, right? Sending a teacher or an administrator to learn about Common Core standards, right? It's like sort of the training you might get from HR, right? It's understanding sort of new information. But what it's really going to be difficult, really the hard work of implementation, is the professional development that's going to change practice in the classroom. And I think when we think about these new teacher evaluation systems and changing a culture within the school and focusing it, and the reason that we talk about multiple measures and the importance of observation and getting more data in is to really change the way classrooms work. And I think, this idea, and I think it makes headlines, is that, we could potentially fire a way out of this, is not the solution here. And I think this emphasis on new teacher evaluation system is really to change the culture of classrooms, to improve teaching and learning. And when we talk about kind of data coaches going into schools and really working with teachers, I mean, that's what we're sort of aspiring to. And change is really possible.
Well, the obvious follow-up question is, to what extent have the teacher evaluation systems been evaluated for actual validity?
Well, I think that's part of the.
I think we're very much in the early stages of this. I mean, if you look at some place like New York, and they're really just beginning to pilot these new teacher evaluation systems. And so I think we're not at that stage. And I think where Race to the Top has really blazed a new path is its emphasis on innovation and in trying to encourage states and districts to try new things.
And embedded professional development. Stop taking teachers out of classrooms, sending them to these off-sites to do whatever they do, and then bring them back. The professional learning community, when teachers have unencumbered time to meet together, allows them to, in time, in real space, think about their development and how they can improve among themselves.
And it's all part of building capacity, rather than having the external come in on a one-shot basis. But 2 comments, somewhat related to the question. Teacher evaluation systems part and parcel of that has to be continuous improvement. The main goal of teacher evaluation needs to be the continuous improvement of teachers during a career, and not an evaluation system that's designed just to get you and sort out a few people. And as far as teacher preparation, a very relevant topic. AFT issued a report a decade ago calling for higher entrance standards into teacher training institutions, higher exit standards. And so it's continues to be a very relevant topic, and one that we are reviewing currently and will be speaking to over the next few months. And then the other aspect of that is the hiring practices of individual school districts.
Right.
Should be reviewed.
Okay, any more questions? All right, this will be the last one.
Hi, my name is Austin. I'm with Whiteboard Advisors here in Washington, D.C. My question is, what do you make of the recent announcements about district-level Race to the Top funding, and how do you think that will improve or add, add further challenges to the Race to the Top innovation process?
Well, needless to say, I view them favorably. No, I mean, I think that the concept of doing comprehensive reform that is that just kind of unleashes the ability for people to innovate applies to different levels of the system, and I think that there's no reason that it doesn't apply to the district level just as well as it applied to the state level. We're working right now on what those criteria would be, because I don't think it's sort of a one-for-one mapping. I think there's some different things that you would want to enable districts to think about and do. So we're working on that right now, but I think conceptually it's a really important thing, a tool to give districts to use.
And from the state level, I will tell you that there is more innovation going on in some of our districts than at the state level. I mean, this is within a state, there are these really visionary, strong districts that do really great work with teachers and leaders. For example, around the Common Core state standards, as we are thinking as a state how to roll this out in a really profound way, we have districts who are already sitting down with the capacity in their districts and figuring it out. So we're having them at the table with us to help us determine how do we do this as a state. I think it's some of our best capacity is not in the State Department. Some of our best capacity is in districts.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Our innovation fund is designed to inspire innovation at the local level. The Common Core standards, we've invested training in over 100 people at the state and local level, so that teachers are at the forefront of designing professional development at the forefront of the rollout and implementation of Common Core standards. And innovation will come best at the local level, but it goes back to there has to be a space that allows people to innovate and take risks and not be judged with every step of the way, because when you take risks, sometimes you're going to succeed and sometimes you won't.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. And we encourage you to read the report and follow up with us if you like. Thank you.